Okay. Well, welcome to lecture number 3 of the Clothing Masterclass with me, your teacher, Bro Satsu, or Satsu, whatever you want to call me. In the prior two lectures, we covered your really basic concepts of clothing, which are tension and compression, where you have, I'll just go over it just so our minds are primed, right? We have made a little smaller. Your piece of clothing, boom, boom. If you bunch it together, right? That's like compression. And then the other one is where you pull it, right? Then you get tension, right? You remember those? Fantastic. So we're going to take that, which was from lecture 1. And then lecture 2, we went over advanced versions of these where you get lots of bunching and pulling in all kinds of random ways. And what do these things do when applied to the human body? That's what we're going to go over today. Specifically, think sleeves, think cuffs, think t-shirts, very just every variation of t-shirt you could think of. Yeah, that's my colors. We want those. So with that, let's dive into the human body. So the human body comes with natural tension points because the clothing will hang on it. So if you imagine like let's start with drawing a body, right? Let's just do a simple we're gonna draw a body. Here's some pecs, right? We're gonna just keep this simple. He's gonna be really, really jacked, right? Right, here he is. He needs clothes. Actually, it should be a winky face, right? Right, okay. And then we got an arm, but bum. Right. So yeah, the face. So um as we take a basic body here and its natural points, which I mentioned, we have this one here, the shoulders, right here, are natural hanging points for all shirts that you wear because it's going to drape off the shoulders, right? If you think of like a toga, they do that, right? And then another big area you're going to want to think of are joints. These joints, boop, boop, will create as you bend your arm, they will create. Let's make a better arrow because we're gonna make this pretty. They'll create natural tension and compression around the joints, right? And then the other part is the end of limbs. These will create, or these will lead to compression as the fabric bunches around some kind of limiting thing. So right here, like a sleeve would be limited. When I say limited, I mean like the hand is in the way of the sleeve bunching, and so it creates. Remember that weird shape we made? I made like the big pooling clothing. That was a very exaggerated shape to get the idea across of what's going to happen over here, right? And I want to also, we're going to show the arm from the side because I want to point out. So here's like a tricep, bicep, right elbow, blah, blah, blah. There's a hand. We can all see that, I'm sure. Do, do, do. As far as limbs go, this goes for the knee as well. The part that bunches or the part that like comes into itself like this is going to create compression, and the other side is going to create tension when it bends, right? And this is the opposite for the knee. Like if this was a knee, right? Here's a butt, a foot. It's the opposite, right? This part comes up, and so the front is going to cause the tension, and then this is going to be the compression. Is everybody with me so far? Can I see a yes in the chat? Okay, one yup. That's all I need. That's all I need, man. That is more than enough to get through. So that is the here. This is tension. We want to make sure these are nice and labeled. Tension. Wow, writing like a doctor. Tension and comp. And then these ones are both tension. And then the last one you should be aware of on the human body is the torso. Like if it bends, right? If I have a torso, here's a nipple, so you can kind of see this is going to be a weird angle. This is where the arm is. If I bend, right, my body, trying to make this obvious. This looks so silly, right? But if the body bends inward like that, you can see that here we're going to get a compression. And back here, we're going to get a tension, right? And so that's most of the ways that the body will create compression and tension points. You can get like kind of miniature ones. Like if you're wearing a glove, for instance, and you curl your fingers in, you'll create compression and tension points based on what your pardon finger up to. Copy before you erase. So I'm not going to erase anything. This is going to be here. And don't worry about copying as fast as I'm doing this. You'll get the video for reference. I'm going to make sure this moves at kind of a more moderate pace so that you don't get bored when you go through it in the future. Plus, we got a bit of a time limit here. So I'll give you a second to look at this, stare at it. In fact, what I'll do is let me just for you guys right now, I'll just copy this and I'll just be able to, I think I can just slap it in the chat. Yeah, here you go. There you go. So you can just look at that there at your own speed, and I'm going to just jump into actually putting clothing on this figure, right? So let's start with talking about this one right here, because an arm is a great place to start. Okay. So I said an arm. Where is my arm? Where is my arm? Where is my arm? Right. We're going to label this. This is the body points. This makes it easier for me to send you things later. Okay, body points. Now, as we come to an arm, we're going to, let's turn this. I think it'll be easier to see if I rotate this to the side. Okay, the writing is backwards. Oh no. Okay, whatever. So we're going to do straight arm. Make that a little smaller because I have to actually fit stuff on it. And then let's even copy this exact one here so we can see this is the same person's arm, right? We don't want to be like, is it someone else's arm? I'm concerned, right? So we got to put in his elbow. Gonna end up focusing too much on drawing the arm, and it's not a clothing lesson, it's a forearm lesson. Right, there he is. Boom, boom. We don't need all that. So let's make this a little lighter so we can see what's going to happen. Light, 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 light. And we want a blue or a red sweater. First one to answer it gets the pick. Blue, done. Okay. So let's do a really simple sleeve here. Right? There's our sleeve. Now, as this hangs, you will get compression, like I mentioned, towards the wrist, which we'll cover next. But right now, I want to focus on what the elbow does, because that one trips a lot of people up. So here's a big one, right? As this arm bends, think about this over here, right? Right, these two things. As it bends, like we said, we get compressions here and tension points here. What does that mean? That means that if you think of tension points, remember, it has this kind of radiating effect, right? And vice versa, when you get compression, you get this kind of scrunching effect, right? So let's just put in some general here. We'll just do our sleeve, right? Here's our sleeve, 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 sleeve. And I'm going to go to red now. Actually, we'll leave it blue. So if we imagine those like little scrunchy things here, and then we imagine the tension, right? From here, when you're doing a knee or an elbow, you're just combining these two forms together, right? So does that look like? That looks like you sketch out these general ideas here of the tension and the scrunchies, and then you just kind of add it on top, right? So if I come down with this, maybe there's a tension right here. There's a tension. Here's a tension, right? See that? Now all of this, well, we can have a tension here, and then maybe there's a scrunchie in between those tensions, right? See that? And it bunches up. Remember like the sleeve of the Roman napkin, right? It just kind of bunches up, bunches, and you can make these gaps wider, and you should, as you move further away from the compression. So when we're in this area here, it's like really tight little areas, but maybe there's a bigger one, and then a bigger one, and then all of a sudden our sleeve is done. See that? Pretty straightforward, right? Is everyone with me so far? Does that make sense for how a sleeve works when it scrunches up, right? And now this is only one part of the body, but every single part of the body will create these effects. So if we continue with this idea here, remember how I said a shoulder is a natural tension point? Well, if we go back to this from the side, like his shoulder is up here, right? There's a shoulder up here, big muscular shoulder, just just so comforting and big. Does all his you're gonna get tension from up here too, right? Which I'll show you right now from the front. Actually, before I dive into that, let me show you this part here because this is where the combination stuff happens, right? And I know there's a lot of parts to the body, and I might have to move around a little bit, and I don't want to lose anybody, but all of these things happen in conjunction, right? Bear with me. I hope this will all make sense because if it, like the reason clothing trips people up a lot, at least I in my assessment, is when I go back to this thing here, right? And you think of a sleeve goes down this entire arm, and you have to think of this tension point, you have to think of this point simultaneously. And to make things even worse, a human arm can move in 1,000 different directions. You can go up, it can go to the side, it can go forward, it can bend. Every one of these can bend or be straight. And all of a sudden, now you have to think of tension at each of these 3 points with the arm rotation. Plus, to make things worse, gravity is involved. Because if I have an arm that's straight out and it's across, all of a sudden I have to think of the tension, the compression against the elbow, against the shoulder in perspective, and there's like a sleeve hanging and it's compressing. Like, do you see what I mean? We're like, I'm hoping I don't get too far ahead of you, but you have to think of a lot of stuff simultaneously to make clothing go, okay, right? Just kind of a hint of what I'm trying to get your head around and demystify clothing for you. So coming back to the basics, where I run off into the woods with a bunch of crazy things. This part here, and I'm going to just get rid of that shoulder because I got too excited. And you're right, I am far too excited about shoulders. So we're going to get rid of that because I got a little head there. And this elbow bends. What do you get? Say it with me nice and loud wherever you are. You get compression here and you get tension here, right? The same goes for the knee and any other joint where clothing is going to bunch based on this, right? If we come back to our hanging sleeve, that's where we find a kind of gravitational compression. The fabric is pooling down to some kind of resting point. And what happens with this? Here, I'll leave that light. You still see this, everybody? Hopefully. As you remember me talking about, hopefully, you remember me talking about this kind of pooling effect that you get from clothing. Well, this is where that happens. This is like around ankles and wrists. And you get those like Y, X, and Z shapes, right? So if this pulls down, we'll that gentle undulation we are talking about, right? Where it's kind of and then it gets a little tighter, right? That's what it actually does. There's just a slight kind of bulging to it, right? You can see if I zoom in, right, and I do this, you can see how it's a little further out, but not by much, just a little further out because clothing's not really, right? You see how it's further out, but I didn't make like a maple syrup pool of clothing. That's what's actually happening. So if you remember from last week, you focus on these inner areas, and actually this should pool even more, right? Because clothing can really just really, really, really tighten. So really, I should do something more like this. And you can make all kinds of different patterns if you want. They can come around the side like that. And if we take this and lighten it and we go to our other layer, all you do is you make these back and forths and then you just focus on these inside areas, right? This is where the money is. Right there. Right inside. And I will actually let's do a green here and you can see that I mentioned X and Y's. Right. Okay. So back to our little shapes, right? These little shapes, shapes. They zigzag, they pool, they make all kinds of neat little areas, right? See that how it zigzags? Did we see that? Am I losing people? Are you all still here, or is it starting to make some sense? Or at least some modicum of sense? Right? I see a zig and a zag. I'm getting like a little bit. Yeah, you could think of it like bubbles. Think of it in whatever way helps make sense to you, right? So it's just kind of these bigger shapes happen. And you don't have to draw the entire shape. You just have to remember that this is like up here, this is a kind of a big loose shape, and you don't actually draw all of this in. You would focus on this part and just realize that this casts some shade because there's a bulging of fabric here, right? Because like the fabric bulges, comes down, and it bulges, and it comes down, and it bulges, and it comes in, and it bulges, and in, and then little bulge, right? Little bulge. See that? Does that little that green line make a little more? Oh, okay. As you see these kind of ridges form. And so, yes, the space between the wrinkles, it gets tighter the closer we get to the area that the clothing is resting on. And now, because you have to remember that it's actually hanging off that shoulder tension point up here and it's draping down, right? It's coming down like this. And so this is going to create that tension, right? Like you remember our cloth hanging, right? The tension. Well, if I put a surface underneath, right? Like say here, right? Suddenly the clothing is going to pool. Despite the tension points, like I could still be holding this with my hand up here, right? There's my beautiful hand. Boop, boop. I'm still pinching it right there. And this part is still being affected by gravity, but this part down here is resting because there's something blocking it from hanging. And in this case, it's the wrist, right? So let's make that a little lighter. Actually draw in. You said you want a blue for the sleeve. Let's get some blue. So I have this like arcane diagram underneath. Let's get rid of that. Now we'll leave that and let's get rid of the blue undulation and that. Yeah, sure. Cool. So what do we do with all these random shapes that I've just drawn here? We just go along the outside. See? That's it. Just follow the little shapes you made. That's it, right? Maybe it's a hoodie. Boop, 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 boop. Nice and warm, ready for winter, even though I guess spring just started. God bless America. And then you just put in your shapes, right? That's it. See that? It's not so scary, right? Clothing's not so bad. And just as you go higher up, just don't create such strong lines around these bubbles you made, right? You make less. You can see how down here I've made kind of the entire shape, but up here it's more like this. Maybe up here it's just kind of like that. And you just imply it less and less as you go. And when you imply the line less, that suggests to a viewer that there's a less aggressive change in plane, right? Your bulge is less pronounced, right? So here, ba-bam, hello there. Do do do. We just make some swishes. We don't even need those, honestly, up here. These ones are so light. Top, right? And remember, because you're smart, that there's tension, so you make it something like this, right? Because there's a tension point off the shoulder, so you make it something like this, right? See, there's a sleeve. There's a really rough idea of a sleeve. Now, these bulges, the aggressiveness of the compression, actually, might be a little better than that, maybe, right? We can probably come in more like, I shouldn't get too precious about it, but that's the idea of it, right? And once again, I've kind of done an exaggerated version of it so you can see in real life, these areas are usually much tighter and they stack, they like if you look at like a pair of jeans right at the base above the boot, these are actually usually pretty tight. But I want to do this nice and big so you can see what's happening. And one of the tips that people go like, oh, is you can think of it as Y shapes, Z shapes, or X shapes, right? So like here's an X here, right? There's kind of a Y here, but it comes around the side. There's an X. You can also get Z shapes, which would look more like, oh, I'm drawing on top of it. Oh dear. Oh dear. Right. And I think I actually sent here. Let me grab something real quick. This was in a newsletter, but it will help with this principle. You'll see it. Yeah, I'll drop that in. This is supposed to, this is from a free newsletter, but this was a little clothing hack that will maybe help you go, oh, okay. Maybe it'll make more sense now. You see that? Those like Z's, those X's, and those Y's. All you do is kind of block out these bubbles and fill them in with this official Brosatsu image trademark. Anyways, so that is what happens on human arms with clothing. How are we doing? We following along? Light bulbs making sense. I am not going too fast, or I'm striking the perfect balance between going fast enough you're not bored and not so. Wait, no, hold on. I think I did. Speaking of math, I'm not going so fast that I'm losing you, but not going so slow that you're bored. But anyways, is this making sense? Are there any questions so far? Y letters. The letters are like a little mental hack. Some people go, oh, and they see the Y, the Z, and the X. I've personally always my aha moment was from these, the like diagonals where clothing just kind of when it bunches, it does this kind of back and forth shape, which is I guess all X's, but that's how that was my aha, that it just kind of makes these stacking rhombuses. And sometimes they're triangular shape, like triangular shapes are on the side of the clothes, right? This is like if this was the clothing, right? You get this triangle on the side, right? That's kind of it. Was my aha. But I've also heard of the XYZ, so I thought I would mention that for anybody who that's where their aha comes from. Because a lot of this is just finding you're like, oh, okay, aha, and then that's it, right? So otherwise, we're making some headway here. Everyone's going, uh-huh. It's the sleeve. This is also sleeve stuff. That should be in the sleeve folder to make sure we have a nice organized file that I send everybody. Okay, well, I'm going to just organize these folders while I wait for a aha. Makes more sense than ever before. That's exactly what I want to hear. Okay, so that's sleeves. Let's move on to the tension point of the shoulder. Well, yeah, still not tons, but that's because you got to go and look at actual references. You got to go look at clothes in the wild. And then when you go and look at them in the wild, on Pinterest, you'll have all this stuff that I rambled about sitting there in your head, waiting to just attach to real life and go, oh, okay, there it is. Oh my God, there it is. Right? You need to go and really just stare at things with all this information as context, because then you have something to attach it to. But on to where's my body? My body, yaddy yaddy. Okay, let's talk tension. Bum, bum. I think there are three positions we should cover here, so let's get ourselves a fresh torso. Yes, of course the face is winking. Of course. Okay, so we're gonna draw a nice torso. Boom, boom, boom. Pardon me while I draw this. Shouldn't get. Okay. So why is this important? Because we have to cover how the heck do shorts work or shirts work, not shorts. Wrong clothing, right? This should help make some sense of what do those bloody shoulders do, right? So I'm just spacing this out so I can just move in real quick. Got to draw my forms out, draw my forms. Maybe someone tell a funny anecdote in chat while I do this. So what do we want? We want to put an arm up, right? I shouldn't get too precious about that, but I will. And then just one arm on this one. Okay. So we're gonna draw my frames in and then you guys can. Okay, we got our bodies. Well, there's nothing wrong with having a stick figure. I just wanted to make sure you could see the muscle here. Well, I guess that's why we're all here. So, red or blue? First one to say something gets to pick the shirt color. Red this time. Okay. So what did I say before? I said the shoulders are a tension point. Why? Because stuff hangs off them. What the heck does that mean? That means, remember all that drapery stuff? If we talk about like a rod, right, and some clothing is just kind of pinned to it, what do you get? You get these kinds of shapes, right? Well, that's what's happening with these two shoulders, is you have two tension points, right? Because when you wear a t-shirt, it hangs off it. And so you can imagine these kinds of soft undulations off the shoulders. And what does that look like on an actual t-shirt? Well, if I draw a t-shirt on here, let's just do a loose one, right? We'll just do the basic one, then we'll modify it. He just has, oops, shirt, right? A shirt. I made him quite wide, actually, didn't I? Right, but there's the shirt. Let's put that in all our fellas. All our fellas need shirts. This is not an accurate shirt. First, I'm going to show you how it changes. Okay, so let's focus on this first one. Put on your thinking caps. What happens? This here, right here, is going to create those tension lines. Remember those? Same with this. Tension lines, right? That's how you put a t-shirt on somebody. And now a t-shirt, if it's a very tight t-shirt, these will be very, very short, right? You'll just get kind of like this. If it's a big baggy t-shirt, you get bigger shapes, right? Does that make sense? Are we starting to get a, oh, okay, that's how a t-shirt works? Perfect. I got a yes. Now, something else to keep in mind. You'll notice right here, arms pinch. That creates tension, right? And then what else? Well, we have another kind of tension. See, the shoulder's not just one tension point. The cloth is hanging off this whole section here, this whole section. And so you can actually get like a little bit here where it kind of comes in. See what I mean? And hopefully this is starting to kind of make more sense when I was talking about you have to think about every point of the body and how it's affecting the clothing, right? Because the armpit creates compression. Yes, tension and compression are everywhere. And that's where you have to kind of think about how is this interacting and why clothing? I know why it really kind of like what messes folks up because you can make it even dumber. Like if he puts a pair of pants on, right? All of a sudden this is tucked in, and that tucking of his pants into like say a belt, this creates compression, right? Because it's pinching. See what I mean? But all of a sudden that looks like a pretty decent t-shirt, right? You're like, okay, all the pieces are there. That's a t-shirt, right? Um, so what does this do when we move into different forms, right? And before I do that, I want to revisit this area here because I see a lot of people have struggle with this one. Is if I draw it in 3/4, right? There's a tension, and we remember that clothing has a wave shape to it as it hangs, right? So that's what happens. Like if we draw this kind of wave, you're going to get this where it lines up. See that? You see that? Right? That's what a t-shirt's doing. It's just a bigger piece of fabric, right? So you get some shading here. I should use red, right? This is kind of shading, right? And that's what's happening in these shapes right here is you're getting that kind of a gentle undulation. Now this depends on the fabric and how big the piece of clothing is relative to the body size, right? It's how tight it is, how tight the clothing is on the body, and how loose the fabric is will dictate the size of these undulations. Like if this is a really tight t-shirt, right? You're going to get lots of like those little distortions, right? Like this, and if this is a really tight shirt, right, and it's like hugging his body, you will get tension points across the body. Like if this is some, you know, polyester shirt, you get really tight, hugs the body. You won't even see like these drapes. You'll see like these little ribs like this because it's just hugging, right? And like this, the chest here will create tension because there's a pull on the fabric over the plane. Um, Describe this like, you know, as the chest bulges, there is an actual tension caused in extremely tight clothing. And I'll get into that in the next part about like the high compression of shirts. But let's just move back to this before I get too excited and jump ahead. Undo. And we're just back to our nice, loose, all-American white t-shirt. You know, he loves his mama and he pays his taxes, right? What happens if he raises his arm to let someone know that he wants to pay taxes? You know, over here, I want to pay taxes, right? Well, this tension point is going to bunch up, right? And it's also going to pull. So as this shirt comes up and it rests on his arm, right, you get a piece of gravity here, which we will cover in the next lecture because gravity is its own world. But this here creates pulls across the body, and this creates more tension than the other point because this one is just kind of relaxed, but this one has actually got there's a very upward force to it now because all of this is pulling, and there'll be a tension here and a tension here, right? And so you get that kind of, right? Something like that. There. Does that make sense as far as lifting an arm? Oh, yeah, right. He tucks his shirt in. So I'll tuck the shirt in while everyone's going like, yeah, that makes sense. Everyone's clicking, going, aha. Now, what happens if he raises both arms? Great question, right? So, what happens? Well, remember there's a tension point here on the shoulder, right? And if you're ever like, I don't know what's going on with clothing, just draw your frame out, right? Here, let's just get rid of this whole thing. His arms up. What is going on? I'm confused. I'm scared. someone hold me, right? So here's the body, and I have piles of poses. They need clothing. You have plenty of things to practice on. I'd even recommend just pull some of the poses and think about it, right? If there's a piece of fabric, so the t-shirt line, fine, that's easy. Or his neckline, right? You know there's going to be a end to the t-shirt and here and somewhere down here, right? Because that's the bottom of the shirt. Let's do these in blue because I'm going to draw over them, right? Well, we know there's one here because the clothing ends, and we know there's one here because that's a shoulder point, right? There's a peak to the shoulder, so we know there should be lines coming off this, lines off this, lines off this, lines off this. And oh my God, wait a minute. There's two lines here and they're kind of meeting. We're going to get one of those kinds of shapes, right? That's what's going to happen. See what's going on here? And you can do that over on this other shirt too. You can map out, well, I know there's one here, I know there's one here, I know there's one here. And so then you just kind of draw on your line. You can like, if I put tension points in, you just kind of connect your tension points, right? You just kind of draw lines from your tension points and then make sense of the lines meeting each other. Did that give you a little bit of a little like, oh, okay, right? So just start with the tension and then draw on the rest, right? Let's actually draw it in now. We have our tension point, right? Here's a tension point. So let's put a line in. Let's make that a little lighter so we can see. So, right, gravity. Don't worry about gravity too much. But here's a line. Okay. Oh, a tension point. Okay, let's put a line in. There's this neckline. Drawing, drawing, drawing. And oh, tension point. Tension point. Oh, tension point. See? All of a sudden, this shirt doesn't look so silly, right? And here's something to think of because I don't think you're confused enough. And fabric has natural seams to it, and those create limits to how it can fold and or how it can like tension and compression points. Because if a t-shirt is sewed right here, so you're going to get an actual pull from how the fabric is made. If you want to start making clothing even more like right, is these seams on a t-shirt, this creates bunching by itself. It's very light, but that's why when you lift your arm up with a t-shirt and you want to draw it, you don't just get a shape like this. It's because it actually hangs to the tension of the seam and then drapes down. Right? And it's not a very strong effect, but it's just got a slight kind of bulge to it. And then there's an actual, because it's the seam here, you might get like a little drape there. See? Oh, clothing. You know what? I'm only drawing naked characters from now on. And here's the fun thing. I'm going to make it dumber. I'm going to do it. His shirt's not tucked in anymore. This is a big t-shirt, right? And it's actually going to drape, right? We bring this down. You're going to get like actual drapes, right? It's going to start doing stuff like this because God's world is scary, right? And if you make it even bigger and longer, he's wearing a skirt, and you can just see how this goes kind of crazy. But anyways, I'm just having some fun. This is just a normal shirt. He's still got it tucked in. I take it back. He still pays his taxes. He's not going to go he's not going to start a reggae band and well, a punk reggae band, right? Anyways, is that all making sense? Where are you? You are there. We're getting some big light bulbs. I don't know if it's making something. Oh, it's making something, but I don't know if it's sense. Yeah. Yeah. Well, at this point, you gotta go practice. Go to Pinterest, type in t-shirts and just study it and look at what is the fabric doing. Because right here, this is like all you need to understand is really what are you? I don't need you. Get out of here. This is t-shirt. All you need to really focus on are these two concepts, right? When fabric is pushed together, it compresses. When it's pulled, it's tension, right? If there's a tightness to it, like this elbow pushing it, you get tension. If there's a compression, you get this kind of thing, right? Here's tension to a different color. Tension does this, and compression does this, right? And then you just meet in the middle, right? That's tension compression. That is like the core basics of it. And when you have a hanging, and I'll leave that there so you can actually just look at it, right? And when something hangs, it drapes. And then you get this kind of shape, right? You get that shape, that like undulation. And all you have to do is just combine those things. That's it. Now I know it's like, just combine it. It's like super easy. Are you guys dumb? No, no, I understand that there's a lot to process here. And I don't want to make you feel like you're stupid. Because I mean, I've been there too. There was a time when clothing was like I had to honestly, there was a time when I had to put a lot of serious effort into understanding clothing and to sit down and really think about it because clothing is really, really, really complicated. Honestly, like if you're having a hard time with it, don't feel bad. This is probably one of the top three hardest parts of drawing. I would say clothing is immeasurably more difficult than hands because hands follow a really consistent, like once you understand that there's like three digits on a finger and a palm is the same length as fingers, hands really start to get kind of demystified. They're not like that irregular. Like they're stuck to bone and muscle and form, and hands have a very actually limited range of options of what they can and can't do. Whereas clothing, like a t-shirt alone, is its own world, let alone if the t-shirt is made out of a heavy like leather, like say you're doing some tribal character, or if it's made out of like linen, or if it's made out of silk, and that's just a t-shirt. All of a sudden there's pants and there's sleeves and there's gloves and there's hats and there's scarves, and every one of these things has its own, you know, dozens of different fabrics and variables. And so don't beat yourself up too much if clothing is this like esoteric, arcane, I don't get it problem. It's because you're looking at clothing as a monolith. Like I should just understand clothing, whereas clothing is actually more of an umbrella for a wide number of garments. Because a belt is not a t-shirt, is not a pair of shoes, is not a pair of jeans. Like all of these have their own different rules. Like a t-shirt, for instance, it has these 2 points at the top, but if you bring in like say the groin area, right, down here, that creates its own little rules too, because now you have that compression right here of this, and you can get like draping off the side if it's like loose pants. And then there's also the compression at the bottom of the pants. Like each piece of clothing is its own world that you can study for a week straight and still learn something, right? So with that, let's move on to, well, actually first, any questions? Because that's kind of the most things you really have to kind of keep in mind with clothing is the pardon, see typing. Nope, nothing so far. No questions. Okay. So let's move on to the last one for our last little. Actually, maybe I might cover two things. Muttering to myself, mutter, mutter, mutter. I want to cover two more things, and one is a very large piece of fabric draped on the body, like think of a cloak, and then I'll go over really tight t-shirts on female chests because that's its own kind of because when I just did like three male bodies, but what happens when breasts are involved? Well, breasts are actually their own addition to make things worse. Wait, question, does the turtleneck have any points on the neck? No, a turtleneck just kind of they're here. This was not in the official lesson plan I wrote up, so okay. But a turtleneck would just kind of hug the neck. If it's a really tight, really thin fabric, like a polyester, you might get like little bunches like this, right? But if it's just like a cotton turtleneck, not really. I'm sorry. I can think of other examples. If it's like a big loose one, yeah, you'll get you'll get those kinds of that zigzag thing I was talking about, right? You'll get those kinds of shapes. If it's like a big loose, like fun turtleneck, if it's just kind of a piece of ribbed cotton, it just kind of does that, right? There's no actual tension to it. If it's like the polyester ones, like really tight, then you'll get like those little bunches, right? Does that answer your question? My answer is it depends. And it's complicated, and I'm genuinely sorry I can't give you something simple. I wish I could, but this is the best I can this is the best I can do without going on for 12 hours straight about one piece of fabric about like, do you guys really want a master class on polyester? Because I don't think anyone's going to enjoy that. Nobody wants that. No, nobody. Maybe. Okay. Um, so one thing I want to cover real quick is let's grab ourselves one of these bodies, just one. And I kind of mentioned this a little offhand, but I want to go into a little more detail here, is when you have long pieces of fabric, right? New layer. I hit enter. Thank you. Right. So you got these points here. Point, point, point. Remember, um, blah, 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 blah. Lost my train of thought. This is for like robes, right? We feel like a robe. So the robe goes around the back, but you're going to have your own set of logic on each one of these things, right? So we do like a sleeve and like a robe, sleeve, robe, sleeve, robe, sleeve. You're going to get, and I specifically want to talk about this long part, is those long pieces of like curtain-like tension are going to happen, right? Coming from the shoulder, right? Just something I want you to think about if you like want to do like long pieces of clothing, right? And I'll introduce a little extra concept to you. If, say, for instance, he has a belt, which would be actually about here, right? These would bunch in and they'll follow the same logic, right? So what you have is like from the tension point, it comes down from the tension point, bulges into the belt. Here's the belt. And then it comes out and does its normal drape, right? If you want to do like really long flowing pieces of fabric, that's kind of how this works. Just as a fun aside, just because I see people trying to draw robes a lot, and I thought I might like just throw this in there. But that's what happens. When you do like long like cloaks, robes, whatever they may be, you just have to really think of that like curtain draping kind of mechanic because it's so far from the shoulder, you get that kind of pattern we talked about before where it kind of hangs like this. Okay. Any questions? That's just a fun little aside because I know some people do it. Buttons. Yeah, sure. Let's do buttons. I'll jump into buttons. I kind of left the ending here for the questions. One thing I will mention about robes or even capes is on the back is you get those same kind like the back of capes either does two things. Either you get um like these kinds of shapes where like if the cloak is hanging from the back, right? Right? See that? Or you get the other version where it kind of bunches up like this, right? Either way, it's bunching. So that's like how you see cloaks from the back. So like if you saw the back of this wizard's cloak, you might see that, right? It just hangs behind his legs. As far as buttons are concerned, you're a fabric wizard. Harry, you're a fabric wizard. Buttons. So I'm gonna call this one wizard buttons. Okay, so let's visit our big chested man once more. Our big burly man. So if we have some buttons, right? We'll give them a belt because we like belts. Oop, right? It's got a really big buckle. Let's put a big what shape is Texas? I think Texas looks like, oh my God. It has the top part and then it kind of comes down, I think, right? Is that what Texas is shaped like? Anyways, you got a Texas belt buckle, big one. It's got an American flag on it, right? There we go. I think that's how Texas is shaped. I actually don't quite remember. I should not waste time looking up how Texas is shaped while I answer a question about buttons. Anyway, so as we draw out the shirt shape, right? Here's the shirt. There's gonna be some tension here. So buttons, 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 buttons. If we give them a collar, right? We got to just draw on the base. You see what's going on. So there's gonna be like a button here, a button here, a button here, a button here, right? And you're gonna have the shirt kind of like this. There you go. So there's the basis, the basic form of your shirt. What happens on buttons is each button can be its own tension point, depending on how tight the shirt is. Like if this guy's really jacked and he's wearing a too small of a shirt, you get big tension points, right? That's what happens. Even the shirt will like open up a little, right? You see like the inside. But each button is a tension point, depending on how tight the clothing is relative to the body, right? So what you might do if he has a nice average shirt, he's not like trying to show off that he eats a bunch of Texan beef and only fights horses in his spare time, or whatever Texans do. I don't know. I live in Canada. I don't know. I assume Texans only do stuff with horses and um eat eagle. I don't know. I'm rambling now. Anyways, anyways, so you get like that kind of effect on most buttons. You get like a little pull, right? Just like that, just light pull. That's it. Does that answer your question about buttons? Okay. And then one last one I wanted to cover before we wrap up here is this is buttons. Is the female chest, right? And what the heck is going on? So here, we'll just draw some bazoingas. That's a big shoulder, right? Okay. So what should this model be named? Let's call her, I don't know, chat, name the model. Or I guess, Cassie. All right. This is Cassie. And she doesn't talk to Harry anymore because he's kind of toxic. Here. So we wanted to do ones on the bigger side, I guess. So we can kind of see what's going on. Because little boobs don't do much. So without getting too much into the nuance of how breasts work, because geez, I could do a master class on boobs. Does anybody want a master class on boobies? Is that something we would like, please? Yeah, just keep refining this character till I get an answer. Dot dot dot. Okay. So let's cover t-shirts real quick on the tighter side. And then I'm going to cover button shirts kind of on the looser, like blousey side, because that's really the two variations you have. So breasts are fun because they happen to introduce tension points. You get tension like this across boobs, right? And they also, because because a boobie, this is from the side here, as they stick out, right? Rib cage. This is, I guess, the nipple here. Pardon me. You will get tension like this because the breast sticks out. And you will also get tension between the breasts depending on the tightness of the fabric. right? So let's explore a t-shirt, right? So remember there's a tension point here. Oop, sorry, so there's a tension here on the shoulder, right? Both shoulders. And we know there's a tension point here and here, which, or actually it's more like on the outside. It kind of, because breasts actually kind of sit out from the chest. They don't like sit right in the middle. A lot of folks like to draw them that way, where they're just kind of floating in the middle of the chest, but they actually kind of go out to the side a little bit because how they work. And I'm actually getting into the breast lesson. Is the breasts don't they kind of hang off to the side like this, and so they naturally have this kind of flow out. And what that does is it means the tension point is kind of on the outside of the breast, right? It's kind of on the side because that's what they naturally want to do. Generally, if it's like an A cup or something, there's not that same amount of tension. But once you get like B, C plus, that's where you get that. So what does that mean for a t-shirt or any kind of shirt for that matter? That means that you're going to have these ones I was talking about, but also you're going to have these, right? And you can also, if it's a loose fabric, you get this kind of thing too. So let's start with a loose one. Okay. I'll just draw a loose shirt. A loose shirt. Right. So you're going to get something like this, and then it hangs. And remember, it doesn't hold, unless it's like really tight fabric, you're not going to get like this. Like I see people do this so often where they just kind of draw the boobs in and like, I'm wearing a shirt, right? No, 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 no. Like that wouldn't happen. Even on really tight clothing, you're going to get this kind of like gap between the bottom of the breast and the actual rib cage, right? And if it's a loose fabric, it's going to do this. It's going to drape off it, right? And it's actually, you can actually get off the breast, you get this kind of shape too. So they kind of radiate, right? And then they have something like this. See? And because this only works on like, larger chested females, because the breast is actually hanging or like sitting out, the fabric will sit on top of it quite relaxed, right? Even though there's a tension point on the shoulder up here, it's not really being pulled by gravity as it does this. It's kind of just chilling on top of the breast and then it gets pulled by gravity. Does that make sense? As we think about because you're thinking about like planes, and I mean planes in the sense of surfaces and how what the fabric is going to do against those planes. Is that clicking, or are we all just giggling to ourselves like a bunch of 8-year-olds? Because I keep saying boobies. It's okay if you are. Okay, we got lost in the ridges and the swoop thing. So remember, when you have two tension points, the natural pattern of the fabric is to undulate out like this, right? But that's only because gravity is directly pulling down on it. What makes things complicated when you decide to draw your, big titty goth girl is the top of the breasts create a plane that blocks the pull of gravity. There's a thing in the way. And so what's going to happen is even though you have this shoulder tension point, and you'd think, like if we go back to our man, right? There, right? Right? You notice how he has like that very distinct hang between the points. Well, that doesn't happen on girls with large assets wearing loose shirts because the fabric is going to sit on top of that surface created by the top of the breasts, right? It's like there's still a bit of a drape to it, but it's way, way, way less pronounced. And then the actual drape happens off the side here, right? And you can see that's what I drew here is there's that drape, and it happens because this is the edge of your surface, right? What you're actually getting is you're getting like the top of the breasts and then the bottom of the breasts and then right? And then there's the actual hang. And so you get this kind of draping off the front there, right? So that's what's happening. And then because you have this flat surface, the drape can be very gentle between the two shoulder tension points, right? So that's what's like what you got to put in your brain. Right. So here's her there to do, and then she's got her shirt on. There we go. Right. So that's how you do maybe like you can put like a light one up top here. That's how you do like a loose t-shirt over um large assets. Now, if you wanted to do a tight version, here's what happens. Because it's tighter, you get a much bigger pull between these because like as I mentioned, there's that kind of outward tendency of the relaxation of the tissue. That's going to fight against the fabric. The fabric, because there's a tension to it, it wants to pull things inward, right? But these want to go out. And so then you get a tension point between them. And you can just do like a Z or something like that if you want, right? And then, so we have a neckline, right? There's the shirt, right? You get tension here, tense, right? Because it's a tight shirt, tight. And there's a little bit of tension here, right? It's a tight shirt. And you don't get like, it doesn't follow the curve inward. It's still got a little bit of a rib here, but it can come up like this, right? There's still tension. And then there's a pull between them. See? Does that make sense? Do we understand how like a tighter shirt works now? And even on really tight shirt, you get like a little bit of tension here, right? You can pull like that. This is a lot of lines that I'm using to exaggerate it, but like it's kind of what happens. It all depends on how tight things are. So that is essentially the basics I wanted to cover. That is, now this gets in, now, even though I wanted to touch on this, you can see how that gets into own world because these lovely things here can come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. And it's just like clothing where like, I mentioned you on a lesson hunt because, um, they come in different sizes and shapes. And then when you mix that with all the different potentials that clothing can take, you can see how just this area alone could be a lifetime of study. You sicko. But hopefully that's sunk in. Anyway, that would conclude all the things I wanted to cover in this lesson on clothing and the body. Are there any questions? And I do see your question there, Tanuviel. I just was wondering if there's any well, yeah, I had to bring it up because it's a topic. Clothing is there to cover that, I guess, isn't it? So we have to study how the clothing works because a lot of people ask me about that actually, where they're just like, I'm not really sure how this piece of cloth is supposed to behave over this part of the body. And to your question about drawing anatomy and just practicing art, it's sort of a strange line to walk as anyone who studies anatomy. Because we have our sort of social mores and our taboos, like we don't talk about those areas because it's probably not, it's not very polite in conversation, I guess, because there's a lot of, let's just call it societal weight around those areas because there's, I don't want to get too much into it, but I guess there's when you get something like as important as, making new people, there's a lot of weight, societal moral weight for those areas. But when you just want to study the human figure because you're just kind of fascinated by muscle and arms and characters, those areas are an inevitability of learning the entire figure because, like the human chest is what, 5-10% of the whole surfaced area. And so it's really hard to not study that, especially because, if you happen to like draw people with very, a lot of endowment, just for whatever reason, I don't judge anybody, that's going to have a lot of effect on clothing. And because you want to just, draw your characters, you want to draw your world, you just want to kind of express yourself or just explore the human anatomy, it you can see how these two worlds kind of bump into each other because you have to, like I've always thought like the real end game of when you're finally done anatomy is when you've studied the human taint. Because you go down the checklist, right? Okay, I've studied shoulders and deltoids, I've studied biceps, I've studied quads, I've studied patellas and ankles. And then like once you go down the checklist, you're like, well, I haven't actually studied how the butt attaches to the bottom of the hips. And you're like, okay, I guess what I'm doing today is I'm going to have to, because I'm a completionist and I want to learn the whole game, is I have to study how all of that stuff connects at the human perineum, right? And so like that's its own weird socially blurred area, but that just kind of comes with the territory. So to the point of like, why is it taboo? It's because you want to learn the whole figure, but parts of the figure kind of bump into a lot of our societal hangups. And so, I don't know. Either you learn the whole thing or you don't. If you want to be a master, you will have to study boobs. And that's just terrible. I'm so sorry that you have to stare at boobs. I wish I could give you a better out, but I can't. Uh, anyway, that was my small tangent about taboo versus anatomy. Do we have any other questions regarding clothing and not my deep philosophical committed opinions? Hair. Okay. Let me stop the recording.